Thank you all, well, all of those of you who have joined us this afternoon. So this Devar Torah focuses on this week's double Sedra, which is called Acharei Mot Kedoshim, and that translates as after death and holy ones, the two words together. Now, I could, if I wished, focus on the fact that Acharei Mot and Kedoshim are two of the 14 parshot which are frequently coupled together. I could also look at the rules that dictate which years they are read together and which years they are read separately. I could even show off a knowledge of Gemara by telling you how the rabbis decide which of the two haftarahs should be read this week. However, most of you will be relieved to know that I'll be doing none of this. Instead, I'm going to focus on a few simple thoughts that struck me while I was reading through these two parshot. So let's start with Acharei Mot. It's all about what Hashem told Moses to tell the Jewish people to do after Aaron's two eldest sons had died after they violated God's laws. And incidentally, did you know that they were not allowed to bury their bodies or mourn their deaths in the traditional way because they were considered unclean because they have sinned? Wonder if that sounds at all familiar. God then told Moses that in future the Jewish people must deal with their sins by setting aside the 10th day of the 7th month as a special day for atonement. He set out all the guidelines for fasting and self-denial that are the trademarks of Yom Kippur. Now, with Shavuot just around the corner, it might seem strange to be talking about Yom Kippur today, because after all, it's still 147 days away. But if we look backwards 147 days to the 6th of December 2019, well, that was just 5 days after a 55-year-old man developed symptoms and thus became the earliest traceable patient of a novel virus in Wuhan, China. It proves that a lot can, and more importantly, can't happen in 147 days. And it makes me wonder what the Yomim Noraim will be like this year. Hopefully lockdown will be over by then for the majority of us, but there will be some understandable anxiety about packing people into the Freeman Sussman Hall or the Marquee to sing Avinu Malkeinu and hear the shofar blown. Plus, with the Jewish community so badly hit by coronavirus, how will we all feel when Yizkor is recited? I, for one, will be looking for guidance from the US and our rabbis as to the most appropriate way to mark the high holy days during this extraordinary year. The second parsha, Kedoshim, begins by telling us, "You should be holy because I, the Lord your God, am holy." It then sets out a very clear recipe for listing numerous mitzvot that we ought to follow. Now, all of these mitzvot are absolutely fundamental to any civilized society. For example, not to lie or to steal, and to always pay your workers on time. Their inclusion in the Parsha proves that God has very clear ideas how he wants us to behave. And the fact that his rules are so firmly linked through these two Parshot to the deaths of Aaron's sons should leave us in no doubt that God will take matters into his own hands should society fail to respect these laws. Is that what we're experiencing today, I wonder? Now, I'd like to focus on three of the commands that are included in Kedoshim. The first is to respect the elderly and the vulnerable members of our society. Looking at the horrific statistics that are coming out of the Department for Health, one might easily think that coronavirus is doing the exact opposite. But I'd like to suggest that perhaps it is helping to raise our awareness of and empathy towards these sectors of our population. Indeed, several of the Sapphire members that I've spoken to in the last few weeks tell me they've never received so many calls. And I hope that the marvelous community army that is helping to shop and run errands for vulnerable people will remain in place long after lockdown is removed. Speaking of the elderly, I feel I should pay special tribute to my mother-in-law, Ruth Briggs, who turns 90 next Friday, and who exemplifies our wonderful older generation. Although she's very frustrated at being unable to go out, she is doing her bit by staying in and following the rules in a way that shows many of the younger people in our generation, in our population up. Indeed, as I speak, she is cutting out fabric to make scrubs for the NHS, and she has, like many of her contemporaries, learned to conference call and Zoom, albeit with varying degrees of success. Almost every family chat is punctuated by regular shouts of, "You've disappeared," or "I can't hear you." But I take my hat off to her and the example that she sets. The final commands I want to cover are two of the most powerful in the entire Torah: to love your neighbour and to love the stranger. Well, I think we've all come to know our neighbours better over the last few weeks. And I'm sure that Berry Hill is not the only street where residents stay out for a little while after the Thursday clap, simply to exchange a few words with a real human being. Well, I really hope that this continues long after lockdown, and I, for one, and I'm sure you, Estelle, too, are looking forward to a street party as soon as the government tells us it is safe to do so. Loving the stranger is much more complex, but it really comes down to putting yourself in other people's shoes and only doing to others what you would want done to yourself. Our society has seen firsthand the effects of what happens when we don't respect others: civil wars, the Holocaust, ongoing global conflicts. But at the same time, some of the best moments in history stem from our ability to connect. For example, when people united during the tragic events of 9/11, when strangers save others from burning buildings or from jumping off a bridge. And indeed, the way we are all helping and supporting one another today. If we could all continue to downplay the overriding importance of me and focus on the concept of we could be nearer to achieving the type of society that God envisaged when he set out Acharei Mot Kedoshim. So that's it. Thank you so much for listening to my Devar Torah. I hope you found it interesting, and I wish you all a very happy and healthy Shabbat.
Thanks so much, Jo. Fantastic. Really, really brilliant. We're going to put it up on our YouTube channel. The next few weeks, just to give you the lineup until Shavuot, Arthur Weiss, then Amy Hertz, then Eli Lejeune, and that is our cast, the all-star lineup for Fridays until Shavuot. See everyone later, or if not, have a Shabbat Shalom. Thanks a lot again, Jo. Really appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Jo.
Shabbat Shalom. Welcome.
Thanks, Jo.
Yeah, good. Hope you liked it.
Good.
You take care, everybody.